Hi, and thanks for attending this afternoon's webinar, where we're going to take a look at my favourite subject in the uniform programme, and that's SPP, standard peak production. What we're going to do is just explain a little bit about what SPP is, and then the two sort of easiest reports to be able to go and access that information. The purpose of the webinars really is just to make you aware that these tools are there, and following this morning's one, we've had quite a few good feedback with people saying, can we take them through their own data? And we're very happy to do that. Obviously, we need to schedule it, but if you can send an email, and then we can arrange a session to log on to your PC and take you through it. There will be a movie. The movie will come out tomorrow. So for those of you that get pulled off onto more important things, you will get an email. And if you click on that, that will take you to the movie, and you can also forward that as well. Very short, 2 questions right at the end. If you could just take the time to complete that, I would appreciate it, because it just gives us a guide if we're covering the right subjects and if the time period is working for you guys. Finally, I spoke to myself for 10 minutes this morning because there was a problem with the audio. So if you have got issues with the audio, please type a question. Emma's on the keyboard, so any questions she will reply. If we don't come back to you, we can check them afterwards, and we will come back to you later today or tomorrow. Okay, so SPP is everywhere in the uniform program. It's on the CAL record, it's on the combined action list, it's on the vet check report. You'll see these 3 figures: standard peak production. So first point is, what is it? It's a Dutch idea. It actually started back in the 70s. As we know, the milk production will fluctuate it's influenced by loads of different factors, management factors such as feeding, milk technique, water, environment, all these things. We also have animal factors: how many first calvers we have in the herd, what the stage of lactation is, number of lactations. This also has an influence. And what SPP does is it tries to take out the animal factors to give you a better guide to where things are going well, or perhaps where things are going wrong. So that's just a little history on it. There's been changes over a long period of time. It is based on milk yield. And what we've always said at Uniform is that if you have milk meters, we think this makes your milk meters even more valuable, because if you have a 7-day milk meter yield, you have a very stable figure that we can then use for analysis. We're looking purely at milk yield. We're not looking at fat or protein. So SPP is based purely on milk yield. So what is it? Well, basically what it does is it looks at the production. So each day we have all this information coming in from the parlor, and we look at it and we say, okay, we're going to correct that animal's production and correct it as if she was a mature animal at 50 days in milk. And the logic behind that is that then means we can compare a first calver with a second calver with an older cow. We can look at how they're producing milk early in lactation, mid and late lactation. So that's the whole idea behind it. It's a corrected value, standard peak production. A lot of correction factors that go into it behind the scenes. And we start with Anushka, who was introduced at this year's webinars. But this is just a way I hope that it explains it for you. So at the moment, Anushka is on a lactation curve that if she follows it, she'll end up at 8,000 kilos. And we're looking at this point where we see the green dots. And what we then do is the program looks and does a calculation. It says, okay, if Anushka was a mature animal at 50 days in milk, this is what her corrected milk yield figure would be. So in this case, it would be 45. Her SPP is 45. She goes a little bit further into the lactation. She's gone past peak, but she's still on the same lactation curve. So again, we correct it and we go back to 50 days in milk and we say, okay, this stage of lactation, she's still at 45. Everything's good, still following the trend. But what we want to know is when she or a group of animals falls away quicker than we'd expect. So this is the graph here. So now we can see that she's actually below the lactation curve that she started on. And if she continues, we're going to end up with something like 7,000 kilos at 305 days. But what we can do is we can look and we can say, well, to start with, she was at 45. She then went to 45. Then at this point, she dropped and she's down to 40. So the interesting thing then is if your herd's average is, let's say, for example, 45, anything above that is doing better than average. Anything below it is not doing so well. So at this point in time, if the herd's average is 45, she's not doing as well as we'd expect. If we put all these cows together, Anushka, all these dots is that heifer throughout the lactation. What's actually happening with her? The blue line is the trend. So she started off, I know she started at 45. This herd is at 41. Between day 60 to 120, it's 41, just like Anushka. Then it starts to fall away, somewhere around 150 days. You see the blue line is dropping. And she really falls away at this point. The whole herd falls away. So we have 41, 41, 40, and 36. So a snapshot of this herd is that the animals above 200 days have fallen away quicker than we'd expect. And that's really what it's telling us. The green line is the average production for all the cows between 0 to 60 days. The top one, that's the SPP figure. And all the dots in there are the cows. The blue line is the trend. Okay, so let's go and have a look actually in the program itself. And then I can show you where the reports are. I know we keep harping on about it, but if your dashboard doesn't look like this, or if you've got empty figures, please call the help desk and we'll set that up, because the whole of the idea of the dashboard is to put information in front of you where you see that action is required. So because this herd has milk meters, then I obviously want to look at the milk meter yields, because with this, I have a 7-day average. If that's set for SPP milk recording, you're just looking at one recording in that month. Obviously, it's still good, but the 7-day average is much better. So, and if you click on it, here you can see what the trend is. And this herd, we had a phone call from the farmer, and it was kind of about the 20th of May. Really concerned, as you can see here, that the figures were dropping. And initially, the phone call was, I think the feeding is wrong for the fresh calved cows. The increased phase is too short. We need to lengthen that. And what I want to show you is kind of what we found out, what was actually happening. So if you click on there, this is the same thing, but now we're looking at milk production. So the first one was SPP. Now we're looking at the average milk production per cow per day. And we can see again in May, the figures are dropping. So the next logical conclusion is, okay, it's dropping, but why? Which cows? So I think this is really where SPP comes into its own. So we go to the cow's head, we go to milk management, and we select production analysis. I'm only going to show you 2 reports because, yeah, I'm conscious of time, but this is really where you should start, the summary, SPP summary. Okay, so the first thing to look at is, okay, what's the period that we're actually looking at here? So if I go into properties, what I can see is that the date range, we're looking at milk meters, a 7-day average, that's all good. And we're looking at the 30th of June. So my first reaction looking at this is the cows, it appears, are a bit slow to get going. Because remember, if they follow a lactation curve, going back to Anushka with 45, 45, 45, 45, she'd be following a lactation curve, but we saw that she dropped. We have the other situation here for this herd. What's actually happening here is they're a little bit slow to get going because the SPP is 55, and then we've got 59, 58, 57. So a little bit slow to get going. What you can then do is you can analyze a little bit more. I tend to just do it with SPP like this because I don't want the milk yield figure and the SPP. Each dot is a cow. So if I put the cursor over it, that tells me very quickly that 2793 has got big problems. 3301 similarly. But then what we can do is we can say, well, okay, where did it actually start? Is it first calvers? So we see the first calvers are down at 49. I go back to all the cows, 55. So the first calvers are low. Second calvers, not so bad. Older cows, not doing as well as the second calvers, but definitely not as low as the first calvers. If you go to recording sheets, this will give you more information on it. So here we can look and say, well, what is a good production figure? The average for the first calvers between 5 to 60 days is 34. Is that good? Well, it's not. It's too low because if we look at the second calvers and the older cows, their SPP is much higher. Okay. What I then wanted to show you was going back to where we had this call in May. You can always go back with SPP. You can look at the 7-day average, and I'll show you one where we can look at 3 years of data. But if we just go back now, you'll have the option to look at either milk recording or milk meter. And as I said, if you've got milk meters, use them. And we're going to go back to the 22nd of May when we got the phone call. Okay, so we're looking at that. I have a 7-day average, that's all good. Okay, and what I can see here is the animals between 0 to 60 days, SPP of 55. Then we have this drop here of 52, 57, nearly 56. So as I showed you on the dashboard, we can see the average production was going down. Where is it going down? Where does it appear that we have an issue going on? Well, it's looking here between 60 to 120 days. Again, we can interrogate it by looking at the first calvers. First calver's not so bad. Second calver's not so bad. Older cows, there you see we have quite a lot of cows there, and that's a big drop. So from 58 to 50, that's a little bit concerning. So what you can then do is we can look at the milk production graph. So if I go to the cow's head, milk management, it's this one here, milk production graph. So I'll just pop that up. Okay, if you have milk meters, select your milk meters, select all animals. And generally, this is how I do it. I want to have a look at it in days in milk periods. We have 3 years of data, but I'm looking at 2020. And then select average SPP. And first, we're going to look at the fresh calf cow. So what this is showing us, this is looking throughout 2020, how all the animals that were between 0 to 60 days in milk in this period, how they were performing. And what we can see here is that this was the issue in May. Well, in fact, really starting from May, the cows between 0 to 60 days were doing pretty well. So then if I overlay it with the cows between 60 to 120 days, in fact, we had a problem that started really going back in April. You can see there, then it really started to fall away. So in this case, it wasn't as we initially thought, the fresh calf cows. It looks like it was the cows that were in that period between day 60 to 120 where we had the issue. So I just take that out. You can see quite clearly there. So those are the 7-day averages. And then starting really from that period, things then picked up. If we go and then look and see, did we get a similar thing going with the cows between 120 to 200? Again, pull it in again. Yeah, they had a drop, but they had a drop later, and the drop was not so pronounced. Again, if we take that out and we look at the stale cows, again, they were doing okay. These animals here between 60 and 120 were falling away, and then everything's actually picked up. So we end up really with a good news story. They're all pretty close. But I think this is a really good report that you can use just to highlight if there is a problem, where you think the problem exists, and then probably more importantly, it gives you a really good chance to be able to monitor it so that we can see if anything that we're doing is actually working. So that's a fairly quick overview of standard peak production. Within the reports, you've always got the average milk yields, but the SPP just gives you a different tool to be able to look and highlight where the problem lies. So as I said at the start, with SPP, I think it's much more important if we log onto your computer and just take you through the reports. We'll quite happily do that. Hopefully now when you look in the cow record or you look on daily milk meter yields or milk recording analysis, when you see SPP, standard peak production, that will make it a little bit more sense. If you've got any questions, please type the questions in and Emma will answer them. And if you have any questions that you want us to come back to, again, please type the question in or give the help desk a call.